Welcome back to the most professional StarCraft 2 with our first finalist, the former world champion and now the rank 2 Zerg in the world in the blue. It's Rogue, facing off against the more relatable Terran from Team Liquid in the red, the People's Terran. It's Cure in a best of 5 Terran versus Zerg finals as part of Inu's Battles, a Korean StarCraft 2 tournament. And before we get started, it'd be incredible if you could smash that like button or maybe even subscribe. Help me kind of the algorithm. And Jimmy, what do we have? 1,886 likes on this video, on this cast, and I'll cast another one. But I'll probably do it anyways, because I don't know what else I'd do with my life. But thank you for watching. Hopefully, you've had a good day so far. And hopefully it's about to get just a little bit better. As both players starting things off, we're not going to say slow, but more methodically. A command center first out of Cure, setting him back those 300 minerals as it does nowadays. Of course, spotted by the Overlord, who's just hanging out, creeping out everyone nearby. Metaphorically at this stage, that could change. But what? 3 minutes and 30 seconds in the game. This would have been quick with a 12-worker start. But on 8 workers, he built a queen, he got Zergling speed, and then immediately a lair. Because one of the things you don't have, if you're a Terran going command center first, well, you could, but it depends on the timing, is a Reaper to scout, which is why he's sending out a scouting Hellion. A single Hellion not intended to do any damage, but at least get a look around. Rogue is taking a third base, which obviously he'd like to have. But it's mostly a fake. In my humble and modest opinion, other people's words, that is mostly to convince Cure, because Rogue isn't even quite at the drone count to saturate 2 bases. He's getting there now, but taking that third base before the 4-minute mark, which is still on the later side, is something to show Cure that he's not doing anything too crazy, too untoward. Something like 2-base Muta. The Mutas are on the way, and Cure is going for a Marine Hellion drop. Looking to, well, the fact that the Overseer is done is a bit of a tell in and of itself. In fact, I think that Overseer existing just gave Cure more information than Rogue is going to get from having the Overseer in the first place. But, well, seeing the Marine medevac drop is obviously very important. He's going to see the 3rd command center started. Cure is sending the Marines towards the main, a few Hellions towards the 3rd. There's enough Zerglings to make this uncomfortable. The Queens are going to come down and politely yet firmly ask the Hellions to leave. And for now, they will. Not because the Queens asked, but because they want to. It was totally their own decision. Double engineering bay at the back, but the Overseer's already done. He knows there's a lair. The Zerglings get into the well, the Zerglings were already there, but the Hellions in the natural. He spots the Spire near completion. 6 Mutas are already on the way. Enough Zerglings to potentially deter the medevac drop. The fact that every single drone in the main base had to take a mandated work break, otherwise it would have taken a permanent one, is not ideal for Rogue. I'm sure Cure knows that Mutas are on the way, but there's no point in building the turrets until ideally the moment the Mutas are flying into your base. So, yeah, turrets are on the way. Well timed by Cure. The Mutas should be showing up just moments after they complete. The engineering bay at the natural is in a bit of a precarious position, as the Mutas could actually potentially pick it off, which is kind of a devastating. The most important thing now, since Cure is clearly, well, actually no, that's way more important. He contaminated using the contaminate ability to delay stim, which will keep Cure in his base a little bit longer. I don't think he had huge intentions of moving out, but there's only 1 Tech Lab barracks, which means Combat Shield, the obvious follow-up, is going to be a little bit slower. That command center is in the way of everything. The missile turret, a bit bruised, and Rogue seems to be very interested in not just making a few Mutas, but taking the Muta risk of going mass Muta against Marines and soon-to-be Widowmines. Now, he's already cleared the most important hurdle for Mutalisks, which is getting across the map at all, because the best defense against Mutas is a good offense. But Cure elected to go for the much more macro-oriented, the defensive command center first, in order to try to get a much better economy later on. And that doesn't mean he hasn't succeeded, because look at the upgrades. Terran and Zerg upgrades of the same tier take exactly the same amount of time. Which means, considering the evolution chambers are not done, there's at least a 2 upgrade advantage for Cure, assuming this engineering base sticking out like a sore thumb doesn't get chopped off by the Executioner. 1-1 is completed, armory about to be done. The best advantage for Cure is going to be an upgrade advantage. Not just because that's what he has, but that's usually because of the huge investment in mutas and the fact they're 100 gas apiece. Well, yeah, who could have predicted this liability? He may delay the +2 infantry weapons, which would be an absolutely huge deal. Banelings are just rolling into the 3rd Cure. On the run, Widowmine, nice little split. The Banelings roll right back out. All right, they only get 1 shot, 1 opportunity. And no reason to waste it quite so far. Gets 2 of the Widow Mines, picks them off as their drilling claws? Absolutely not. Does he even have a second factory to invest in it? No. Some of the SCVs are taking quite a work break as well. The engineering bay is physically blocking the Marines, and the architectural decisions and the civic planning of Cure end up severely hampering him as time goes on. Building the... I don't know if he built it there before he scouted the Spire, but it was clearly a less than ideal placement. And now the main advantage that Cure, we're not going to go with enjoyed, but at least could have relied on, has been somewhat whittled down. As +2 infantry weapons just now starting, meaning Rogue is only about 30-45 seconds behind. +2 infantry are... Banelings? Did he get... No, looks like the Banelings just went down. All right. It was 3 Banelings for 1 Widow Mine. Look what they must do to mimic a fraction of our power. Twice the minerals, 3 times the gas. But he got rid of the mine. The Chew Toy supply depots at the front will be much more easily managed by the Mutas. But of course, they're there to give some early warning in the cheapest way possible. And they do their job. A little painful, but much better than killing Marines or SCVs transferring. And Rogue has just taken full control of the map. He's got a 4th and 5th base on the way, the Hive Tech. He hasn't started his 2-2 upgrades, but the Muta count has grown to 24. As we pass the 10-minute mark, and Cure has barely been able to move out of his base. It's 80 drones to 69 SCVs, which is not a nice place to be for the Terran. Concussive shells, he's filling in everything. His plan is hit 200 supply, and then hit Rogue as hard as possible. And I love Rogue's new kind of, well, he knows the map is dark and full of Terrans. So he's trying to light it up however possible, which a little bit ironically includes going beneath it with the burrowed Zerglings all over the place. Much more reliable than burrowed Banes. As burrowed Banes 1 will get the Terran to scan all of the time, which could help a little bit, but is not too costly nowadays. But the burrowed Zerglings are not something you almost ever suspect. And another thing you don't usually have with Mutalisks is great creep spread, because you usually don't end up with too many queens. Because, 1, investing in that lair early, you don't have too many hatcheries. You're focused so much on making sure you have the mutas out that the economy, the creep spread, those are all secondary. Now, Rogue with only 4 queens, but the Hive is done. 2-2 upgrades on the way. Cure only +3 armor, so the echoes of the engineering bay going down are continuing even minutes later. Both players maxed out. Rogue banking a little more. Ultralus Cavern is on the way. Not too surprising considering the situation. He's clearly incentivized Cure to go for the Marines, the mines. To an extent, a few Marauders. There's even a Thor here. And the double drop to the north. I don't think... he's got a Baneling mine in the vision blocker as well, just to double up. Intercepts a few scouts, but down goes the hatchery to the north. And a few drones transferring there. Didn't get the memo. 7 down before he could turn away. They'll expect one of us in the wreckage, brother. Leaves 1 Marine behind, but the rest are going to pick up and go to the main. And the Mutas now have some hard choices to make. The Thor out in the midst of everything. Banelings will Oh, Whittle Mine! Big connection. More Whittle Mines burrowing down, slamming into the Zerglings from downtown. And now the Muta's in the main base. 2-2 upgrades not done. This is when Cure is strongest. Rogue is in the midst of a transition to Hive Tech. But Cure has maxed out with 2-2 upgrades. And he's tearing his way through to the 4th base. Clears up the creep. Takes out the hatcheries. Splits and stims and parts the Red Sea. And the Banelings aren't enough to drown him. The creep is not enough to drive back the Terran army. And Cure, just like that, takes out 3 hatcheries in 30 seconds. 7 Ultras in production, though, for Rogue. They have yet to be delivered from the mail, but he actually opened up the base down the center. 8 Ultralisks to complement his Mutas and not just tell them how beautiful they look, but instead to chew through the Marines and, well, that Thor that's also here. But Cure has done a great job hitting his timing as sharply as possible. Did exactly what he needed to do. He would have liked to get more, but I don't think he could be too unhappy with what he did get. 24 Mutas still. Though, and some ghosts on the way. Cure anticipating this transition, because clearly Rogue, the fact that he was... What am I watching over here? Help me, Step Commander! I don't... Just chill. Brenda, stop condescending on the Ultralisks. Well, you don't even know what that means. It means talking down to people. The ghosts taken out with ease. 1 or 2 ghosts is no match for the Mutas, just like 1 or 2 Medivacs is no match for 8 Ultralisks. Off to the right side, the Banelings taken out. And the Mutas will work on one of the planetary fortresses to the north, the hatchery under fire. More Banelings rolling in. Cure looking the other way. And the Marines will melt. But a hatchery taken down. Another drop picked up. Gets out. Muta's second command center. 7 SCVs dead. Drops into the natural. And a lot of damage being done so far on both sides. Rogue losing a lot of his economy. Cure loses his outlying bases, but he has more command centers to back him up. He's building up the ghosts. The evolution chambers in the main could be a liability, but the Ultras are able to scramble back in time. A single Whittle Mine at the natural. A bit of an explosive thorn/missile platform in the side. Another hatchery attempted. The Marauders bashing through will force the cancel yet again, but the Mutas eventually clean it up. Still an army entrenched over to the right side, and this is that kind of slow burn Terran push that Cure originally was so incredibly strong at. And you know, now that I think back to quite a number of years ago, the reason it was so strong was the defense against the Mutaling Bane, which used to be one of the most common strategies. Now is less common, but Rogue has never been one to let anyone else decide how to play the game. He rejects your metagame and substitutes his own. But Cure, well, gonna try to snipe that metagame directly in the face. Lines up a volley of shots, but the Mutas overhead. Drags the Whittle Mines in, and they don't discriminate. The only thing they don't hit is Whittle Mines, and Ghosts decidedly not, despite their best efforts. Maybe next patch. The planetary fortress at the back, and the Ghosts are not nearly enough. The sheer biomass is just rolling over the front lines. The Ultras down to 2, a couple caught up in the planetary fortress, but the Mutas are still helping to add the damage and make sure the Ghosts can't stand their ground long enough. Sure, the snipes can no longer be interrupted, at least by damage, but enough damage interrupts them permanently. So like and subscribe for existential dread, and appreciate Rogue's tactics here with the Mutas complementing the Ultras over the top. A few Banelings trying to... Alright. Burrows preemptively. 16 SCVs dead. Rogue only has 57 drones, though, which is certainly a lackluster economy for a Zerg who's going for some of the most expensive attrition-based units in Ultras, Banelings, and Mutas. But the Ghost count is down to 4. The Ghostbusters have done their job. The Whittle Mine still forcing quite a toll. The Banelings, the Baneling Mine gets 3 SCVs and a few mules. The Thor finally dies on the front lines. There's not that many Banelings behind. Another scan. It's not a mine, it's just a Zergling underneath. But the Ultras try to chew through. Not lining up the shots yet with the Ghost. Banelings on the front. Melt through a bit of the front line. Muta's trying to help, but there's a bit too much biomass here. from the Terran this time around in order to turn the ties. Cure 152 to 165 supply. Rogue back up to 66 drones, but Cure does have only 4 orbital commands, and he can't easily afford to drop mules without risking losing a significant portion of his army to potentially baneling mines. The creep has been pushed back. The hatchery, high ground. Great split out of Cure, and this concave is just too damn good. Fighting into it for Rogue would be the ragged edge of suicidal. Banelings rolling in. Then burrowing down. All right, then. What are you going to do? Scan? I mean, kind of had the same effect, didn't it? And he gets a scan out of him. Why not? Trying to chase down the mutas. So far, only 14 mutas lost, which is incredibly low considering how much value he's gotten out of them. 14 mutas still with 20 flapping around. 176 to 171 supply. Rogue's economy. Oh, he didn't clear up the widow mines and they fired again. But still not quite enough to turn the supply into Cure's favor. Rogue is working off of... Well, Rogue doesn't have mules. All right, that's kind of the key point here. But he's doing such a great job of making sure none of these outlying bases are reliably able to mine. Of course, Cure is doing the same thing to Rogue on a regular basis, but the mutas have survived in a game where almost as many Ultralists as mutas have died, which is just incredibly impressive. Or maybe very bad for the Ultras, really. There are two ways to look at it. A huge baneling mine over to the left side, gambling a bit on it. He's using the changelings to scout whether he can safely place baneling mines. Just the ways they nerfed. Wait, why are the ghosts here? Oh no! Those ghosts getting taken out more times than Blizzard with the game named after them. Meanwhile, baneling's rolling it down the center, and Cure doesn't react at all. The orbital command says good luck and good night. 13 more SCVs dead. And Rogue just keeps finding these angles absolutely everywhere. He finds the ghosts. These ghosts were spotted by a burrowed Zergling. And then as he killed the ghosts, he brought the banelings down the center. He knew there wasn't high ground vision because of the changelings. Rogue sitting at 360 to 350 APM, which I have to stress is actually incredibly low for a Zerg and a little bit low for a Terran, but he just works so much smarter, so he doesn't have to work harder. And the vision he's able to get throughout the map, both instinctually and literally, is unrivaled. And now, well, Cure, despite all of this, Cure has restabilized. It's been a hectic game. Rogue has lost 1,000 more gas, a couple hundred more minerals. But Cure has enough orbital commands to maintain the economy, about even. Both sides have been so exhausted from these. But the fact that Rogue has less workers right now is worthy of note, which is why I noted it. But he's at 20 mutas, which is, I think, right around the perfect number. Enough to one-shot Widow Mines, one-shot Ghosts, take out Medivacs easily, but not enough to be a total liability if you're caught in a fight with just the mutas. But the Ghosts are caught right off the bat. The banelings are rolling through, picking off the Liberators. He can't line up the shots because of the explosive acid shield in the way. The Ultras are chewing through the rest. The mutas gutting the base. The SCVs are being eviscerated. Cure cleared off the field, and his army's just gone. The economy gutted. The army melted. And Rogue, most of his key units, he lost only 4 more mutas and 1 more Ultra in that fight. What an incredible... He doesn't have a single Infestor, nor a single Viper. But the way he's moving his units and setting up these fights is paying absolute dividends. Rogue is... well... the Executioner is well earned as a nickname. Wait, are there two? What is that tiny set of rocks? What? Anyways, who knew? Cure That was critical damage. He lost the orbital. He wasn't able to build up the Iron Bank. And now there's another wave. There's so many Banelings behind. It's a bit of an awkward fight with the Ultras directly in front who may melt away before the Banelings get anywhere close. But the numbers don't lie. And I think they spell disaster for Cure. The Muta's still swinging through and cleaning up the dregs. GG! A grand masterclass in Mutaling Bane from Rogue. And Cure did a great job in countering it, but not great enough. Rogue just took command of the game. I don't want to blame it all on the engineering bay, so I won't. But that was certainly the domino that fell early and contributed heavily to Cure having a less advantageous or less strong position. Wow, that was an old school sort of game. Rogue, the more ghosts you have, the more Banelings. Not to kill the ghosts, but to make sure that they can't kill you. Game 2. So, Rogue has shot up the rankings with the new patch. You might be like, well, Zerg is so good. No. He shot past Raynor and Solar, who have not adapted well. I think it's... Honestly, I attribute it less to the actual patch changes, though in many ways a buff to Zerg. Though you could argue the 300 mineral command center, the 2 supply uninterruptible ghost. But I really think Rogue is... always been capable of being that there's been an argument in the past. I think the best argument as a rival to Serral as the greatest of all time. Not anymore. We'd have to go several more years. But because of his ability to just completely dominate in a way that seems inevitable. A way that only players like Serral, Maru, and Clem on some days really do. And Rogue has not looked like that really since his strongest era in like 2018, 2019 when defeating Serral and Maru and, well, the laundry list of who you might think is the best of the best today, but easily falling to Rogue on a regular basis. I think, therefore I am. But the new patch has just motivated him. Because he was already such a unique player. I'm looking forward to Dark coming back as well, of course. He's already said he's looking actively for a team while he's still in military service. He's still playing. He's still in the top 20 on the Korean GM ladder. He just can't play tournaments until he returns in, I think, October. So look forward to that. We're eating good Zerg players for the first time in a little while. That's going to upset the Terrans, but what doesn't? And I really like Rogue's style. And yes, I'll say it over Serral. Because he plays a style that looks like Zerg. Serral just looks like a... It looks scripted sometimes. The perfect spellcaster usage, the planning 4 steps ahead. It's not that Rogue doesn't do that, but he didn't build a single Infestor or a single Viper. Alright, he made Mutas look incredibly good. Even though, like, the way he used those Mutas as kind of a crowbar. Just... And sometimes the Half-Life style of just beating the devil out of those Terrans. And sometimes as literally something to pry open the defenses. I cannot stress how hard it is to keep Mutas alive productively for that long. It is... They just seem to be... Banelings might be suicidal, but Mutas certainly are. For normal human beings. But he just always in the right place at the right time before it was needed. And I think this is really taking away from how well Cure played. I think most of Cure's mistakes were just on the civil engineering side. The engineering bay placement, the expansion timing. he gave up a lot of initiative. But Kier's always been a strategic player, where he's the people's Terran, because he will lose his entire drop to Banelings, but then he'll have another 2 drops ready to go. That slow sort of siege push, even though he didn't build a single siege tank. The siege is more of a metaphor in this case. But holding a certain position on one side to anchor it, force the opponent to pay attention, and then hitting the other, or just slowly grinding them down. Because it's not about how many men you lose, it's about how many you have to replace them with. But then Rogue playing with like 56 drones, which is wrong. That's not how you play Zerg. Said I, the uneducated. As apparently it is. So, here, this time opting for, well, kind of a similar style. He's got 3 CC, a few Hellions poking in. Rogue is going for +1 Carapace first, as opposed to a quick lair. I don't know, that game was pretty on a technical side. While the execution, well, I think games are more... This is why people are so nostalgic about Wings of Liberty. You go back and look at how many times Banelings just roll into 20 Marines, or the Zerg loses all of their mutas looking the other way, yet the game goes on 20 more minutes because both players are equally, relative to today, inexperienced. Like, it all balances out. We hope. With all the fire and fury. What really matters is who survives it. Baneling nest just now on the way to lair. Way later than the previous game, as Kier comes in with the double drop timing. 3, 2, 1, 1. Making sure he's got a bunch of dudes with drugs and guns. The queens. No, we'll ask them to leave. Rogue, definitely not one to over-drone. 60 drones. Gonna open up a slightly larger worker lead with that single Zergling counter. He actually got more Zerg, 3 kills. The surgical Zerglings. Surprisingly well done without opposable thumbs. Few more drones on. Now, the, oh, Hydra's turn. I was leading into my spiel about mid-game tech, but Rogue did not keep us waiting. There are the several varieties. There's the mutas, which you need to get out early, otherwise, really, if the mutas can't go on offense, they're much more of a muta risk. Hydras are your mid-game powerhouse. They're quite expensive, but a lot more reliable on defense. Oh my. The Hellions will survive, and you know what they say. That which doesn't kill you racks up a ridiculous repair bill. I can subscribe so I can pay for health insurance. Hell yeah, brother. 69 to 62 workers. Rogue still relatively low economy, but nice enough for this sort of composition. 132 to 128 supply, but Cure found an opportunity for the siege push. And against a non-muta-based Zerg, definitely a better option. Jammed into the corner, making sure he has some ground to retreat to. A big counterattack, but there should be enough on defense. These supply depots to filter through the Zerglings. Some chew toys and just in general. Gonna get into the mineral line, but decides to pull back. 1-1 is now done for Cure. +1 Carapace for Rogue, finishing up +1 melee. Here's an opportunity to drive forward. The creep spread, pushed almost all the way back to the hatchery. The Hydras now have range, but not speed, making it still a dicey endeavor to potentially push into those tanks. Cure moving forward. The siege tank on the low ground, a little late on sieging it up, but now stimming to the front lines. The Zerglings catching some of the units on the counterattack, but about an even trade. Meanwhile, the Marines. Banelings a little bit late to the party, but they will get there eventually. The Marines forced to pull back, and oh no, the Banes! All used on a single tank. Certainly not ideal. Eventually we'll pick it apart, but wait! There's more. The double drop gets off to the left side as Rogue was scrambling to deal with the tanks. And Rogue is right back down to 3 bases, while Kira is taking a 4th command center and stimming his way, Terran through the defenders. A couple drones, and Kira is taking command of this game. Losing that 4th base when you're going for a ground-based composition is devastating, because that's not just his economy, it's his production. He needs those units, and he simply doesn't have them. And that means Kira's moving forward yet again. A couple more tanks. 1-1 against 1-2 upgrades actually in favor of Rogue. The Hydra count is damn high. Might be able to pick up, but he body blocks with the Marines. The siege tanks retargeting. But there's just not enough Marines to hold their ground. But guess what? The drop over to the left side. The Banelings aren't able to break through. And this is restricted their space. And who's enforcing that, Brenda? Well, ideally us. Don't we have other jobs? Well, who else is going to do it? You think Hydras are anti-air, Susan? Not now. People have had enough, Brenda. It's time to stop. I'd like to see you try, Susan. Sorry, I blacked out. 2-2 upgrades on the way. Cure with a 25 supply advantage. And he's going straight down the center towards the heart of the swarm. The 4th command center. Looking to land. The Zerglings looking for anything else. The Changeling. Wait. Hey, boys. Does Kieran notice? Oh, they were looking a little suspicious. Oh, and the army caught on the field. How does it... Like, Rogue is at 154 supply right now. Against 194. This is a massive deficit. He is far behind at the moment. But the key is not to show weakness. Rogue is incredibly good at pretending to be ahead. And sometimes he can convince his opponents that's the case. But right now, Cure... Another changeling, but he spots the army. He's going for lurkers with infestors on the way. If he can survive long enough to get to hive tech lurkers, that certainly can stall out the game and potentially swing it into his favor. But Cure is maxed out. He's fully willing to throw away the red army to build another one. The tanks on the high ground on either side. These siege tank pushes, devastating. The Marines more than enough. The siege tanks thinning out the Hydras. The Zerglings and Banes are gone. 81 to 61 workers. And over to the north, this Overlord spotting for everything. There's already ghosts on the way as well. Siege tanks retarget, look for the Banes. Rogue pulls back in time, cleans up the drop. Cure over to the right. 2 more command centers on the way. He's building up the infrastructure at home. Also very important to note. The infestors have not yet been spotted. I think they came into the scan at the last second. Hatchery under fire. Fungal catches a few. The Banelings coming through. Doesn't catch the second group. Target fire is good. Hive is nearly complete. The supply, though, dwindling. 190 to 150. And a 5th command center will be landing as Rogue is struggling to mine from 4 bases. He technically has 5 hatcheries, but he's only had 60 drones, which is certainly not a booming economy. We've got the orange upgrades, the +3 attack for mech for Cure, as well as +3 infantry weapons and armor even further ahead. Rogue starts lurker range. He has yet to start any lurkers, as he's on a shoestring budget, which is, well, not very much, because Zerg don't even have shoes. Alright. Trying to push past the seat. No. Doesn't even break the tank. 1 HP, 0 fucks, and he guns down a whole nother chunk of Zerg. The 4th base will fall yet again. Behind it, a fusion core for those tier 3 air upgrades, and, you know, maybe if he's feeling like style and battlecruisers. The laundry list of upgrades for Cure is certainly quite a contrast to the pittance for Rogue. An EMP whipped out. Hits multiple infestors. Siege tanks trying to retarget. Finally, that 1 HP tank goes down. But Rogue refuses to die. But not losing and winning, becoming quite a significant difference at this stage. He still hasn't built any lurk. I think he just wants to build one big round of lurkers and go for the win with that. The fungal catches several medevacs, a siege tank, and another group on the high ground. Microbial shroud on the hydras, and he's just making magic happen with the spellcasters here. Perfect choices. Adding in the microbial shroud to reduce the damage after the most of the threat of snipe was removed. And another attack at the back. The Marines and Marauders, but the infestors are there to box it out. And I would say Cure is at risk of losing his lead, but that is just simply not true. The thing is, it's been cut into slightly, but unlike the previous game, Cure has the economy and the infrastructure to fall back to, and that's simply the biggest problem. Even if every unit that is currently on past the halfway mark or near the halfway mark of the map died spontaneously from the shame of playing Terran, then it would still be very difficult for Rogue to get much done. Because advanced ballistics, multiple liberators, +3 siege tanks, ghosts. There are 6 orbital commands and counting. But, what the 12 infestors. You know, a Zerg makes 12 infestors, and it draws a gasp of incredulity from me. Terran makes 12 ghosts, and we ask, why didn't he make 12 more? Interesting. Food for thought. Microbial Shroud. Hydras. The building armor upgrades, and again, Cure takes out the we'll call it the 4th base at this stage. And again, Rogue is forced to pull back to defend. Divide and conquer. 1 medevac goes down. Most get away. Swings around to the right side. Cure is not so rich. Oh, they just, well, the ghosts line up their shots. The microbial shroud does nothing against it. The medevacs are, yeah, well, he just kind of stands his ground. Fires off all his snipes. And, Cure. Well, this is... If he had 1 more fungal. Oh, no. The infestors are a little bit too... So there's like 40 supply. So close, but yet so incredibly far. And he comes back in yet again. And I think that's the high-velocity automatic rounds that broke the Zerg-based camel's back. As that's just too much. Rogue... For every step forward, he has to take another half dozen back, and, well, the Venn diagram of Cure unveils his final form. The Marines and Marauders, no. We're all tied up as Cure secures that early lead, and he never quite lets it go. That was the difference between Rogue being able to keep the pressure on with something like Mutas, and Cure keeping the pressure on against the Hydras. Just anchoring the army with the siege tanks to one side and swinging with the drops, stabbing them in the back. And we're all tied up. Both playing to their strengths. And whoever's able to get that clear advantage early, able to carry it through. Though, neither going down easy. Which is great to see, of course. That's probably why you're here watching this, and we didn't skip over this match as a one-sided stomp. 1-1. I'm actually going to keep some close watch on Rogue's build. Don't usually focus too much because, as our admittedly less than methodical polls have showed, the most people looking for the broad strokes as opposed to the pointed details. But I think the devil's in the details, and the details are usually in the production tab. But some of them aren't. Some of them, like setting up those overlord placements or camera locations. The things that happen, like the mineral pairing. So, pairing 2 workers on the close mineral patches so they mine slightly quicker is more relevant than it was with the 12-worker start because you have less workers. And the next 4 workers going to the closer patches is actually a noticeable mineral increase. And by noticeable, I mean 10, 15 minerals a few seconds faster. But it is worth the effort. Compared to 12 workers when you already had most of the workers probably on the close patches. So occasionally it was worth it, but... Rogue going for the 17-17. Is he? Oh, really? I assume so. So, getting 16 workers exactly. You can go up to 24 and it's still efficient. It's just 2 workers perfectly will go back and forth with no downtime. When you start adding more workers after that, especially on the closer patches, which is why 20 is probably the limit of most efficiency. I know it turns red, but that's not illegal, Bronze League heroes out there. The, Fire Marshal isn't going to come in and say, that's too many workers on the mineral line. No, it is still more efficient to mine with 24 workers on one than to long distance mine. It's after that point, when you're waiting over a full trip, there's always 1 worker waiting. That's when it's too many, over 24. And I'd say over 20 is when you're aiming for it. But please, I have seen one of my favorite and understandable Bronze League hero traits. I've been looking over some replays lately, is seeing the 17 out of 16, it turns red, and not long distance mining, just going idle, like you're about to get fined or something. Okay, it's a marginal tax rate, which might require some explaining to a surprising amount of people. You just get slightly less income up to 24. It's not none. And you don't get penalized, except by not being as efficient as having multiple bases. Also, mules ignore all this. Mules have their own thing. They can mine right over the top of the SCVs. Sure, maybe it's a little uncomfortable, but let's be honest about the workplace environment of the SCVs and not get too caught up in that. They're all going to be replaced by automation anyway. Third command center on the way. The hatchery, the queen. Churlish. Insubordinate. Brenda, how would the Reaper be subordinate to you? Everyone's subordinate to me, Lucille. I'm not even gonna dignify that with a response. That's what I thought. Why are you so feisty today? Sorry. Hive mind took a Rogue with the quick lair. Yet again. Is it Muta time? The Hydras? So very clearly, whoever had the first air units was able to dictate the pace of both these games. Mutas kind of serving a pretty similar purpose to Medivacs in keeping control of the economy and forcing enough units to stay at home that you're relatively safe. We'll see. He's getting 2 more gases at the natural. It seems very likely he's going to take the Muta risk yet again. There it is. The Spire in the main. Meanwhile, Kira. He's got Cloak on the way for the Banshee. And by the way, Banshee for the first time. The classic 1-1-1. The Overseer. Actually maneuvering around out of vision. A single Hellion spotted. Wait, there's a weird amount of Hellions. Kier, I don't know what he's... Oh, he's keeping him back to defend against Zergling counters. I see. It takes 3 Hellions. 3 Hellion hits to burninate a Zergling, so having groups of 3 is the most reliable. The Holy Trinity, the Terrans call it, which feels a little dramatic, personally, but The Spore not quite done. No cloak for the Banshee, but the Queens very much cannot fly, as we all know. So the Banshee will get a few kills, keep the Queens anchored back. The Hellions will threaten. So I think the clear, it's not even a failing. I was going to phrase it like a failing, but the part of Rogue's play that he kind of does not prioritize, notably, is the creep spread. As both between his strategies of relatively low economy, low queen count, and just relatively low APM, the creep spread is just something that is not a priority nearly as much. It's obviously important to get as much as you can, but when you're going mutas, it's a little bit less important, especially since mutas don't benefit from it. The creep spread, of course, increases the speed of all ground units in some fashion, some more than others. Yes, I get it. It was an allusion to us. Not everything's about you, Brenda. This was! Okay. Yes. I don't. But the mute is out again. Cure? I think a bit better. Well, the engineering bays are in a precarious position. If he loses the upgrades, and this time it could be both. If he ends up losing the upgrades, then, well, Rogue just dives in between the turrets and somehow survives with... He hasn't lost a single mute, and they heal. That quick regen. Now, there's no way you're going in against that. Enough Hellions, a few Widowmons, and baby, you got a stew going. But the engineering bays are decidedly vulnerable. It's a very real possibility, I'd even say probability, that they will be taken out at some point. Working his way through. The mutas. Slicing through a couple SCVs with the glaives through the refinery. And Rogue with that very efficient creep spread stretching out a little bit further. So again, it's going to be Cure building up to the best timing he can possibly find to keep control of the situation, ideally before Rogue overwhelms him with Mutiling Bane. Cure will have the upgrade advantage. He'll have the better fighting composition, unless something goes horribly wrong. But Rogue, well, aptly named. Rogue's not known for fighting fair. And those are the sort of strategies that Rogue relies on. And we're just flapping around again. The Marines turning around. The supply depot wall will be torn down, and Banelings may roll through the opening. It's clearly setting him up for later on. And the Banelings could just kill the missile turret, and that could complicate things dramatically. Widowmine's coming out, rolls in, counterattack. And the command center itself is under fire. But here come the Banes. He's on the creep. Cure, he understands the risk here. Great split. Widowmines, and the Banelings just evaporate. But the mutas took out the orbital command. The supply is 133 apiece. And suddenly we're in something of a base trade. The missile turret, it survives long enough to take out a couple mutas, but 13 SCVs dead. Kira's still trying to go forward, has to pick up into the medevacs. The Hellbat's holding for now. And, well, Kira is bleeding out. While Rogue, I think, has cauterized the situation. There's not enough Marines in the main. Those are +1 mutas. A murder of mutas just continuing to rampage throughout the map. He gets hit by one Widowmine. There's a Thor acting like the weirdest and most unwieldy and also most dramatic turret. Getting whipped around in the medevac. Unfortunately, too large to actually fit inside, so it has to stay on the outside. The medevacs, Rogue pulling back those mutas to make sure Cure can't target him. And oh no, Cure losing track of the Marines, and I think the mutas are just going to clean him up. With the +1 attack, and the Marines already at half HP, Cure. And there's a changeling. Jacked up and good to go, right, boys? You know what I'm saying? Those Zerg pretty scary. Boys? Oh. Changeling, you know, that short-term memory loss would make a lot of sense. But again, all they have is short-term memory, so. relative to everything. All we have is short term. +2 infantry weapons. Cure! Another command center, but I feel like this is desperation. Rogue was actually down to 3 bases again. This happens all the time. But he just refuses to act like it. Where the prioritization is so good. And Cure, again, unable to really figure out what he wants to do against the Mutas. Because if you attack, then the Mutas can backstab and cut into your production and your economy. You kill the base. But if you don't attack, then Rogue takes the whole map. So the Mutas certainly dictating the pace of this game, and it seems like this series. Their existence or lack thereof. And now Rogue has a hive on the way. Cure is relying on that mule stimulus check. He's going to try to get to 200 supply. He will have... Well, he's not going to have the upgrade advantage by the time he can move out again. There are only 20 creep tumors on the map, which is remarkably low. That's why I remarked on it, but despite that, Rogue has managed to get it clearly the priority on spreading creep where the most obvious attack angles are. And now a chiropractor's office of spines being set up at the mixed gold base. Did you know there are rock towers that can drop and destroy half the mineral line here? I haven't seen... I bet Percival knows that. I bet no other pro... I've not seen a single pro player go for it. Like, well, wouldn't they go for something else? I think it's worth just destroying them. Like, are you going to take this base as a Terran? Players should just be taking these out with a few Zerglings or no, a few Marines. They only have 500 HP. Like, earlier in the game. This is the balance for the base actually having more mineral patches. Fun fact. It has 6 blue and 3 gold, which is 9 mineral patches, including the gold patches. It makes it an incredibly lucrative base. But each of these mixed gold bases, except for the very center, does have that destructible rock tower, which can be used to limit the economy. Though the time for that has certainly passed at this stage. And the time of Ultras is nigh. So, despite everything, Cure has survived. And now he's got 200 supply, which has not been the deciding factor necessarily before. The changelings are scattered in throughout. A Ghost Academy just started. Rogue clearly has the momentum. He's got the bank. And he's even going to be pretty close on the upgrades. But the Widow Mines thinning out quite an amount of the Zerglings. But the Banelings still rolling through. The Muta's on top of the base and just wipes it out. Refills in most of the gap with Ultralisks. Wow, he's only lost 4 Mutas. Even then, 5 Mutas. 6 okay, well. Another incredible display. 7, okay, well, I just had to say something, didn't I? 11 Mutas. As of 1 minute ago, he had only lost 4 Mutas, and we're just going to ignore everything past that. He was freeing up supply for Ultras. Technically, yes. The changelings are, I don't think, even intentionally creating some traffic jams here. But that is, he's got 41 Banelings, 5 Ultras. Ultra speed on the way. I think he didn't notice he didn't have it until now. But it's good he did. Adrenal glands, of course, done. 3-3 upgrades completing. And just slamming into the 4th base again. Cure is retreating into his shell. It may very well be worth it. Trying to draw out some Widow Mine hits. That's so many Banelings. But the Widow Mines, well, thinned out. There's a few behind. The Thor just kind of melts. The Ultra's chewing through, lines up some shots. The Ultra's getting a bit spread out, but finding enough surface area. The Medivacs caught on the wrong side of the fight. And the Mutas and Ultras just carving their way through the defenses. Not a particularly clean fight for Rogue, but it didn't need to be. Cure destroys 1,600 more gas, but he loses 14 SCVs. He's down to 140 supply that he can't easily replace. Rogue has remaxed out already. 33 Banelings, 6 Ultras. He's coming in again. The Banelings just rolling through, and there's just not enough in front here. The Mutas following up the front line in order to clean up the planetary, the turrets, the SCVs themselves. And another round rolls in. Cure can't expand because of the creep. He has 5 orbital commands, which isn't too terrible. Where are you going? We're going to the next map. Please. I'm applying for... Most of the SCVs taken out. Cure is 108 to 113 army supply. That's not enough. Widowmine slams in. The ghost count is just not high enough. Rogue is leveraging those Banelings. As long as a Widowmine doesn't get like 20 of them in a single shot, then he should be able to just roll through. Ultra's lining up the shots. He's splitting those Banelings at the last second here. And the Mutas are flapping through. And the damage is done. The Mutas are clearing up whatever the Ultras and Banes have carved out. A clear purpose for everyone. And Rogue goes up 2-1. Cure surviving longer than potentially expected, but the Mutas again the choice, and the Mutas again the pivotal unit, I guess, in securing the victory. Well, personally, I love to see it. You might not, if you hate fun. But Cure getting caught in a very similar scenario. So, historically against Mutas, well, the Thor is the choice, as well as Widowmines with drilling claws. It might be just a bit of an experience. Not too many players will rush Mutas in current year, in this economy, as there's such a, believe it or not, despite what Rogue is doing, there's such a risk where if you ever lose more than a couple in a fight, they just come across the map and probably kill you because you're behind on upgrades and can't afford Banelings. But that just doesn't seem to happen to Rogue. Cure cannot find an opportunity to capitalize, which is why right now he's underscored. Command center first. 1 minute. The hatchery at a similar timing. Both cost 300 minerals. Now we see. What does Cure do differently, if anything? Some of it, I think, just comes down to execution. There's not... I think it is a bit of a fallacy a lot of the time. In StarCraft 2 specifically, and RTS games in general, of wondering, like, what the counter unit is. What is the correct counter unit? A lot of the time, it's less the strategy and more the real time. A lot of the time, the answer is Marines and Medivacs and Widowmines. It's just better. As, for better or worse, more stuff counters less stuff. With some asterisks attached. Now we see. Does Rogue opt for the Mutas again? So far, 100% win rate with Mutas. With, again, a little bit more than just the Mutas themselves. Factory on the way. And this is our... We've had our most dramatic games on this map. Let's put it that way. A lot of choke points. A lot of awkward angles. Overall, I'd say the amount of terrain certainly favors the Terran. But there's a lot of opportunity to expand aggressively as Zerg and get a lot of bases early if you get any semblance of map control. So, the general vibe is it's quite difficult to just kill your opponent on this map. More than most. Despite not having too many ramps. It's just the sheer amount of choke points and the way you have to move around them. And Rogue again. He knows what's working. And if it ain't broke. The layer's on the way. Does he get the double gas? Just maximizing that mineral count. Which is part of why you pull out of gas usually as a Zerg, once you get the Zergling speed. Unless you're going for something like Lair. Because making sure you have the minerals for the third hatchery, the drones, the queens, usually something falls by the wayside. And with this sort of build, it's just a lower queen count because... What? Kira taking us to McDonald's, though. He's got Mag Field Accelerator on the way. That 50% more lock-on damage for Cyclones. And it appears that his answer potentially to Mutas, assuming, well, or just in general, is going to be the Hell Clone style of battle mech. And, well, I don't actually know if that's a better option. So, Cyclones automatically will lock on to air units, air threats, before ground ones, if they're within a similar range. So they kind of naturally deal with the Mutas, and they kill them so fast with the upgrade. Thing is, they cost just as much gas as those Mutas. So if 8 or 9 Mutas catch 2 or 3 Cyclones out of position, that is an easy win there. Maybe not of the game, but in general. And that's a huge investment out of Cure. So it's going to be very important to make sure that first set of Cyclones stays alive. Doesn't even necessarily need to do damage, but he can never lose the critical mass. I guess much like the Mutas themselves, but it's going to be based around the exact numbers of Cyclones and the position of the Mutas. Much more than Marine, like for Marines and Widow Mines, it's the upgrades and the total supply. But for Cyclones, it's simply just keeping the critical mass. Like, you cannot afford to lose them early. But if he gets a dozen or so, essentially the Mutas are invalidated. We'll see if Rogue does anything differently. He's moving out with the first clones, which is a risky endeavor. Magfield Accelerator is done. The Mutas, there's only 8 of them. Only 3 Cyclones here. The Mutas are flapping in. He's bringing in the Zerglings to help kill the Cyclones more quickly. And not an auspicious start, but the Hellions are incinerating the Queens. And they can get on the mineral, and the Mutas have to come back to defend, but he's trapped in a prison of his own design. And the drones will be charbroiled. 9 drones, 10. So this is the sort of damage he needs. Rogue is down under 50 drones. Oh no! It's a disaster economically. So even though he lost the mutas, this has given him time to build up the missile turrets. He's rebuilt the cyclones. And Kier now has a worker lead. Does he have an armory? No. Well, that means no upgrades. The muta count still growing, but he had to rebuild the drones. Rogue has caught right back up. But he did have to reinvest in drones using the larva and the minerals. Mutas. Back in the main. Scans to complete the lock and knock the mutas out of the sky. The chunks falling into the awkward native inhabitants. Supply depot wall holds against the casual Baneling counterattack. Double armory on the way for Cure. And the economic damage, I think, tilted the scales pretty dramatically. If it had just been the fight, then the mutas clearly won it. But the mutas weren't able to kill the Hellions fast enough. And any momentum the mutas might have gained on the other side of the map, completely squandered. Drilling claws on the way. 3 cyclones at a time. Rogue only now going for a 4th hatchery. That was the real limit here. The fact he had to rebuild so much and continue building units, otherwise be at risk of just getting run over, means that his economy is tenuous at best. No upgrades at all for Rogue. No melee or carapace, nothing in the sky. He just started his Evo chambers. Cure has his armories at the back of his base in a vulnerable location, which, well, not ideal, but the Cyclones will lock on. Another scan to secure some more kills. Try to drag the Widowmine hits. More mutas knocked out of the sky. Blue Flame Hellions in the mineral lines. Only 3 drones. 6 more mutas on the way. But Cure is still progressing his infrastructure. He's getting upgrades. He's getting tech. Whereas Rogue is going for Overlord, Speed, and Burrow. He's going to go above and below and try to circumvent the problems in between. But it's getting more and more desperate as time goes on. The fact that a 4th command center is already building a planetary on location. The Banelings rolling in. The supply depots will be dismantled and then rebuilt. Hellions try to slip by the right side. There are 20 mutas. Now, it's another scenario, just like on Rainfall, where Rogue is in that purgatory of not losing. But he's got a long way to go before it could ever be called winning. He needs to crush an army, and then ideally translate that into destroying or at least knocking out a base. Forcing it to lift, or killing all the SCVs, or ideally both. As the infestation pit just started, Rogue may be at equal supply, but the unit composition is, well, fragile at best. The Overseer in a perfect spot. Cure does not see, well, oh. He didn't see it, but he knows it's there because of the sensor tower. Scans to take it out. 5 Widowmines and 5 Cyclones in production. That's quite a composition. A very interesting battle group. 6-7 Widowmines and a few Cyclones and Hellions scampering over to the right side. Clearly, the Muta killers. Cyclones to the left, Cyclones to the right, and Mutas stuck in the middle with you. And, oh, the Widowmines just completely obliterate the Zerglings and Banelings. He's going for the, good luck and good night. The The outlying base is taken out. The Banelings will wipe out the missile turrets and SCVs alike. Another round of Banes, trying to find something productive to do. The Cyclones, it's just... none of these are juicy targets for the Banelings, to say the least. The Hellbat is burninating through the mineral line. The Cyclone count is so damn high. And Rogue swings back to defend. Cure, 40 supply lead after the somewhat literal smoke clears. And he's gonna try to crush the Cyclones here, but he could lose several mutas in the process. There are Widow Mines softening it up as well. GG. Cure makes it far too painful to continue. And we're all tied up going to the ace match. Cure chooses the Hell Clones, and it's super effective. It's just too much. Fool me once. Shame on me. Fool me twice, says Cure. And, fool me twice, and I won't get fooled again. And now the decider. At Eternity's Edge. Fitting somewhat. These two very evenly matched. Cure finally switching it up, and dramatically so, with the full mech composition. I think now it's on Rogue to adjust, or at least throw him a curveball and see if he swings and misses. As the mutas, I don't think they're a every game of the series unit. Once or twice, sure. But going for mutas as a default build has, for a long time, been risky at best. And clearly demonstrated there. Cure. No command center first. Hatch first for Rogue. Interesting, none of the 4-player maps showing up in 5 games. Which means, so there are 3 4-player maps in the map pool. Which means all of them were vetoed by these two. As well as Rorschach, because this is a best of 5. So, of course, leave it to the pro players to veto the 3 4-player maps and the 1 1v1 map that has a different layout. This is what happens when you let the pros determine the map. Now, I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just pointing out that these 2 players went out of their way to make sure all of the maps were pretty much the same general design with no major deviations. BlackRock is probably the most weird of them, but in terms of the first 4 bases or so, it is still of that same variety that you know and, well, for consistency's sake, you probably should love. Reaper first? Is this the first Reaper? No. No. But it's the first Reaper off a 1-Rax expand. What we would usually consider the standard, at least a couple months ago. I think still most players are going for Reaper expand in this matchup. Cure, maybe a little unique in the more economical command center first. Because it's not so much the 300 mineral command center allowing you to get command center first. It's making the rest of an already smooth build smoother. The Reaper Hellion into Banshee sort of situation where you can just significantly more easily get your Hellions and your Banshees in your 3rd command center. Speaking of 3rd command centers, though, well, already on the way, while simultaneously denying any attempt at a 3rd hatchery from Rogue. Does he just go for the lair? He's got 2 in gas. The Reaper just denying the 3rd. Is it Muta time yet again? Have we rolled back around? He's got a second guess immediately. Now, that is the only quick... He gets in with the Reaper, which may actually be good for Rogue. Wait, did he see the second guess? He actually didn't see anything. He sees the lack of third, which is quite important. And gonna scout the lair, scout the second gas. Speed is about to complete. Which, overstaying is welcome. He actually does get out, because of course he does. 2 gases at the natural. Is it... This will be the tell. Like, does he think mutas are the way? No matter what. Or is this some sort of swerve? He doesn't have a roach one, which would be... There's the spy. The most obvious play. That doesn't mean it's a bad one. It'd be super interesting if this does... Well, mutas are my favorite unit in the game. So, super interesting is underselling it for me. If it does just become the standard. Dropping the creep here to make sure the queens can get out. He doesn't even have a creep tumor. This is the very first one. The third base just now being taken. Rogue is pretty much all in on Mutalisks at this point. He's up against a Terran who's already on 3 command centers landed. Whereas he did not even take a third hatchery. So, he is going to have to get some damage done. There's Baneling speed on the way. Cure goes for the double engineering bay before getting any additional racks. Oh, is this a Baneling all-in? So instead of a macro muta, this is macaroni with cheese. Mutas and Baneling speed. He does not have Evo chambers. He's not building drones. I think Kier's quite aware this is likely mutas. But the one thing he can't tell is how committed the ground army is. At least the one thing he can't tell easily. So... The fact that, like, Rogue is not building any more drones. That is something that just simply Cure cannot know. Not right now. The Zerglings get into the natural. Anything to slow him down. A single Marine at the Watchtower moves away at the least opportune time. Missile turrets in production. Combat shield is halfway done. But Rogue he's still at 44 drones. The missile turret isn't done. He's gonna lose an SCV, maybe 2. And every second counts here for so much. Loses 1 muta. And, oh, Kira's moving out. Which could end in disaster. Well, the mutas are still getting that. He doesn't have enough production. He's on 2 racks. He went for 3 CCs, 2 engineering bays, and 2 racks. He has 13 more SCVs. He has dug too deep and too greedily. 11 SCVs dead. Speed Banes. He doesn't have upgrades. He doesn't have combat shield. The mutas are an existential threat. And the Banelings even more so. He just walks right in. He left the door open for him. It's a disaster. 28 SCVs dead. There's a Viking. Rogue, the executioner, swings the axe. The economy decapitated. And the Lings and Banes. Well, Cure isn't dead because he does have 3 command centers with mules. And he's got 1/1 upgrades. But Rogue is not done. He doesn't really have a follow-up. And until he's completely pushed back, he's not going to need one. The muta's threatening. He's just trying to get him out on the open field where it's a lot easier for the Lings and Banes to get the damage done. And here we go, coming up the ramp. The Widowmons are not burrowed. And it's a disaster. The Banelings rolling in. The Widowmine is enough to drive him away for now. And Cure still holding on. Those 1/1 upgrades are a huge deal. More Banelings coming in. He stims again. A few Marines out in front, but it might just be too many Banelings on the corner. Again, the door's open. The splits, the stims he's holding. But without the 3rd command center, well, he's stimming again, which means a single Baneling could completely doom all of the Marines. Getting a little bit too close. The medevac's out of energy. Cure 2Gs and Rogue takes it 3 games to 2. He leans on the Mutaling Bane. This time around goes all in and smashes Cure before he can get his production rolling, unlike his Banelings, which went right through the front door. Rogue. Each game drawing, well, quite a series. From the very even Mutaling Bane versus Marine Mine, the Hydras against the tanks, to a much more strategical exchange where the builds were getting the better of each of them. Still, quite a full spread that hopefully you enjoy. And hopefully made your day at least a little bit better. Thank you for watching. If you got the means of motivation, be awesome to check out Patreon, YouTube membership, but I don't like and subscribing. It's still free. At least for now. Make sure to check out this video. Jibby picked it out just for you. Thank you to our meal tier patrons. Big Jiggy, Devin Dorkate, Crazy Mouse, Mario Suit, and everyone. Glad you still enjoy. Hope to see you next time. Thank you for watching. Good luck, have fun. Stay chill.